When the current iteration of the Honda Civic came out back in 2016, we called it a huge leap forward from its previous iteration. Now, it's no longer the boring-looking sedan that just did A to B with no flair at all. It became a more dramatic-looking, radically styled family car, and it had looks to match. Now, 3 years after its launch, they have given it a bit of a refresh, so we're here to find out if it's still any good. Now, on the surface at least, it doesn't look like Honda did much changes because, well, they didn't do much changes. But with the aid of magnifying glass, we're able to spot them. Now, first and foremost, they have a sort of redesigned grille with the RS badge now prominently displayed. Also, the bumpers are extended outwards just that little bit more, but it's enough for some to notice. And if you take a closer look even, the garnishes for the fog lights have also been changed from a sort of curved line right to a straight line. Also, with this RS model, it has a new set of alloy wheels. It's an inch up from last year's model, from 17 inches right up to 18s. But for the rest of the car, well, there's actually not much changes to go for. The side profile, wheels aside, and the rear are largely identical to the 2017 and 2018 models. But that's not to say the Civic is a boring looking car now. In fact, it's still a striking thing to look at, especially in this bright shade of rally red. And it still stands out in the crowd, thanks to these black highlights, which separates this RS Turbo model from the more pedestrian 1.8E. Of course, if this is a little too extroverted for you, there's the E variant with the 1.8-liter non-turbo engine and a new entry-level model called the 1.8S with halogen headlights. Now, when you step inside the cabin of the 2019 Civic, the changes are a little more obvious, although they don't immediately pop up. Now, what you will see are red highlights on the seats, on the door panels, the shift boot, and even on the steering wheel. Now, this is exclusive for the RS model with its sort of sportier pedigree. Also new for 2019 is the infotainment system. Now, it's not totally new in terms of software. It's still the same familiar interface we had from 2016. But what is different is the addition of physical buttons and even a volume knob. That's because some people found the haptic touch controls a little bit confusing to use, but, well, if people want buttons, then Honda shall give buttons. Also, this RS variant comes with this sort of brushed metal trim, and I say it sort of jazzes up the cabin a little bit. Now, this is the front seat, and I say the cockpit wraps around you really rather well, and you have this feeling that you are connected with a car because you sit rather low, and with a wide range of adjustability in the driver's seat, you feel one with the car. So this is the front. Let's go check out the back. Now, if there's one thing we usually commend about Hondas, it's the interior packaging, and they somehow find a lot of space in here all the time, no matter what size category it belongs to, and the Civic is no exception. Now, granted, the front seat is set in my height, so it's pretty much pushed forward, but still, if you put someone of my height behind this front seat, there's buckets of legroom, footroom, and knee room. You know, it's almost like an accordion here if you're not a tall adult. But if you are a taller adult, it's still actually not so bad. Although I do have to comment about the headroom. If I lean back all the way, there actually isn't much. And that is the result of the swoopy coupe-like styling of this car. But still, if you sort of lean forward and sit up straight, there's still a fair amount actually. Now, if there's one thing I noticed as soon as I turned the wheel in this new Honda Civic, is that there's more feedback coursed through the steering. Now, that's thanks in part to a larger set of alloy wheels. The old one had 17s, this new one rides on 18s. And it even has grippier rubber along the way. That's actually riding on Michelin Pilot Sport Force, which is something you'd actually find in sports sedans. Now, I welcome the additional steering feel. However, that does come with a bit of a trade-off, and that's a slightly firmer ride. Mind you, it's not uncomfortable, but you do notice the extra firmness in the ride. If you bought the Civic RS to enjoy the twisties a little bit more, well, you will welcome the changes made to this car. If there's another thing I'm going to note about the 2019 Civic, is that there's a little bit more road noise seeping into the cabin. Now that's not because of the car and the lack of soundproofing, that's really down to the tires because of their performance orientation. Of course, if you want a little bit more serenity in the cabin, you can always switch them out. But while the drive feels a little bit more enhanced than before, what is familiar is the performance and even the economy. Now it still has the same 1.5 liter turbo engine, so we've become accustomed to this performance and all that. And you have to say that, well, it still feels good after all these years. You don't have to worry much about economy. Now, this car, particular unit actually, has been through a lot of traffic, a lot of standstill traffic and whatnot. And yet, despite that, it's still returning almost 9 kilometers per liter. Now, if you thought of a car with about 170 horsepower in the past, with that much fuel economy, you'd probably even think that that's impossible, but thanks to advances to technology and all that, it's actually doable these days. So, what you have in the Civic RS is performance and economy all in one package. And we pretty much said the same thing about 3 years ago. So what do we think of the 2019 Honda Civic? Well, I have to say it's still the same car we fell in love with back in 2016. And in fact, they made it even better by giving it a little more feel and feedback behind the wheel, which is something keen drivers will greatly appreciate. Now, this RS version retails for 1,608,000 pesos, which is a lot of money for what is essentially a C-segment sedan or a compact car. Although it's not exactly compact anymore, is it? Because it has about the same amount of space as a 90s Accord. So why is it this, well, expensive? Well, there's a lot of features inside and it's pretty well packed. And of course, that turbo engine doesn't come cheap. And there's a lot of attention to detail in this car that you'll simply appreciate and perhaps you'll say make it worth the price tag. So if the price tag doesn't bother you, I say go right ahead and get this RS Turbo. You're gonna enjoy the performance, economy, space, practicality, and its performance. Personally though, I am happy with the Civic 1.8e. Sure, it doesn't have the turbo, the leather, the more aggressive look and all that, but it has most of the things standard in the RS anyway, and it's much more affordable. But again, if you don't mind paying that much more, it's the RS, it is. Now, before we wrap up this video, there's one cool feature I want to show off of the Civic RS, and even standard in the 1.8e. It's this, the remote starter. So what you simply do is press the lock button and hold the restart button, and it starts. I mean, what car in its class has this feature? How cool is that? And you can even turn it off remotely.